I often think that you can understand the trends of what's happening in the mental health and substance abuse world, meaning what kind of drugs are people using, like right now, we're probably a little past the middle of a terrible opiate epidemic, or the trends of anxiety as becoming a more and more common psychological phenomenon that we're talking about a lot. And why is that the case now as opposed to 10 years ago? In my mind, those disorders are directly in relationship to what's happening in the culture. Well, the culture is moving too fast. Everybody has anxiety. It's like, wow, okay. Everybody's using heroin. Why are they using heroin? Well, heroin's one of those drugs that slows you down. Kind of slows down your heartbeat, slows down your system until you kind of nod off. Well, so to me, that's, sort of an adaptation. It's an adaptive response to a society that's moving too quickly. And I think many of the ills that we're all suffering have to do with a society that's moving too fast on many levels. In terms of the complexity that's required of us to function well in the society, in terms of the amount of information that's out there, and that's constantly, frankly, being beamed into my life. It's just happening so fast. How could I ever understand what's really going on? And so there are social norms that contribute to what's happening in those realms. And there's kind of a one-to-one correlation between those things, although it's not always completely exact. One of them that's been going on for a very long time, which maybe has to do with some of the blooming of psychedelic work that's happening, is, my dates could be off, but let's call it in the 1950s. Coming out of, I think, World War II, coming out of sort of national propaganda, there began to be in the corporate world a concerted effort towards understanding marketing, understanding ideology, and understanding propaganda, how to get people to do and believe certain kinds of things. It became kind of a science in the corporate world. And that's continued on and been refined on and on now through the decades, to the point now where we have companies like Facebook and Google that are, they have algorithms that are, tracking what we're doing and feeding us certain kind of messages, drawing us in to consume more and more content, to buy more and more things so that other people can make more and more money. An interesting side effect of a society that begins to think about the value of everything in relationship to being bought and sold on a marketplace, i.e., there's an interesting side effect of a social marketing society that thinks about almost all things as a commodity. How much is it worth? Right? So that very notion, meaning that society as a marketplace, that begins to shape our consciousness. I mean, I've talked in previous videos about religious consciousness and the consciousness of the Enlightenment. I could talk about the addictive consciousness, but there's also a marketing consciousness, right? And so in a world where everything can be bought and sold on the market, what about me? Can I be bought and sold on the market? I mean, both literally, that's happening, but also like my personality. When I'm going into a job interview, what am I doing? Well, I'm trying to sell myself. What might I be doing here in this video? Well, I'm trying to sell myself and my ideas to you. And in this case, I'm actually not. I'm trying to offer something of value in education, but there's so many domains in which I'm selling myself. And what happens when a human being begins to orient themselves in a way where they're thinking about themselves unconsciously as a commodity? Well, we kind of know what happens. I mean, I think Karl Marx was right about this, that the result of that is, some form of alienation, some sort of disconnection from myself. And so that's in hyperdrive, with social media and people taking pictures of themselves, and everybody has their own commercials, basically, that they're marketing to everybody. We're in hyperdrive marketing space. I mean, I don't even think we understand it. And in that space, what does that do to the consciousness of the people that are engaging in that? Well, they start to think about themselves as things that need to be marketed to other people. I mean, that's where their value lies. And, do you like my picture? Literally, et cetera, et cetera. And in that sense, okay, so often then I don't have much of a self, or at least I'm not connected to it because I'm just a commodity. I'm a thing that's bought and sold in the marketplace like anything else. And what is the result of a human being that becomes alienated and disconnected from themselves? You don't feel good. You know, it doesn't feel good to be disconnected, unplugged, unwhole, right? And what do human beings do when they don't feel good? They begin to try to find ways to feel good. We usually call those vices if they're unhealthy. So you can see the direct relationship between the trajectory the United States has been on, some other countries, in terms of marketing, etc., now in hyperdrive, and people using drugs and alcohol. Well, if I'm just a thing, who cares if I stick a needle in my arm? When you really think about that in a deep way, imagine somebody, or maybe you know somebody, sticking a needle in their arm and pushing the plunger, using heroin, and the syringe, until they pass out. I mean, for me, it's very metaphoric. I'm so disconnected from myself. I've lost so much value for my own existence that I just want to disappear. It's almost like a symbolic, like being nailed to a cross. Or it's like, don't you see how disconnected and how much pain I'm in? So for me, this is kind of, in a lot of moments where a lot of us are at. And we have different coping mechanisms. Sometimes the way we cope are, let's call them healthier coping mechanisms, like we become workaholics, or we get obsessed with our projects, or, the gym is an example I use, which are all, fine. But the root symptoms that we're treating are the same, alienation, demoralization, disconnection, shame wounds, not feeling like we have a place, not knowing, where we're headed, not knowing what this is all about. These are sort of deep existential issues. So it's always wise to look around what's happening in society. It's easy to look at somebody who's suffering from addiction and say, that person's sick, that person has a real problem going on. It's much more difficult to go, well, actually the whole society's sick, and the fact that there's so much addiction is actually a symptom of a larger societal ill.